Hello everybody, this is going to be talking about Ripple XRP in this video. So definitely check it out, listen to it. It explains what's going on with their lawsuit, and I do believe their lawsuit is about done and wrapping up.
Sticking with U.S. oversight, Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse sat down with Crypto World's Mackenzie Sagalos to discuss the latest on the XRP lawsuit. As a refresher, the SEC sued the company as well as two of its executives a couple of years ago, claiming that Ripple raised more than $1 billion by selling XRP, which was an unregistered security. Meanwhile, Ripple denies that claim. The CEO shared his thoughts on the SEC's attempts to regulate the crypto industry through court rulings, so take a listen.
So you've been in a very high-profile legal battle with the SEC for almost 2 years. Both sides have now asked a federal judge to make a call on whether XRP is indeed a security that falls under the purview of the SEC. My question to you is, why now, and why are you foregoing the right to go through a trial and present more evidence? Why are you so sure that everything is already out there?
So trials are really reserved for when there's a question of fact. And so juries and judges are like, what are the actual facts? In this case, the facts are pretty clear. The question is about the law. And we think the law is clear. And the law requires, and the statute as written by Congress, the law requires that there's an investment contract. That's step one. Before you even get to the Howey test, which is often talked about, you have to have a contract between two parties. We don't even think we get past that step because an investment contract, if you don't have an investment contract, you certainly don't have security because there's no agreement, period. If you get to the Howey test, then it's also a question of law. So we think this step of summary judgment is, first of all, the fastest path to resolution. We have been pushing very hard to move this quickly, partly because we think the law is clear, and partly because we think the whole industry needs the clarity we're seeking.
You know, the SEC has made the case in its motion that that there can be an investment contract without a contract, any rights granted to the purchaser and without any obligations to the issuer. What do you say to that?
In order to have a contract, you have two parties. No matter how the SEC wants to spin the facts, the reality is to have a contract, you have two parties have to agree on something. You don't necessarily have it written. You can have oral contracts. You can have implicit contracts, but you have to have two parties. The reality is there are not two parties. Ripple doesn't know who bought the XRP. The people who bought the XRP don't necessarily know Ripple. You have to remember that 99.9% of XRP trading has nothing to do with Ripple, the company. So when you talk about, okay, XRP is a security, I go back to something I said years ago when this started, a security of what company, of what, who is the owner? So I think it's very clear there is no investment contract. If you get past the investment contract, which I think is hard, across the Howey test, you also don't have, you have to meet all three prongs. And in the case of the XRP case, you can't meet all three prongs for sure. And so we think that the judge will see that the law is very clear. We think the facts are very clear, and we think this is just a gross overreach of the SEC trying to wrest control of that uncertainty that has existed. And really the unfortunate thing is the SEC and really the US government hasn't taken this step to provide that clarity that a lot of other countries around the world have.
I mean, for years you've spoken about the fact that that lack of regulatory clarity in the U.S. Stands in stark comparison to Switzerland or Singapore. And so we have made steps since you first made that comment. The White House on Friday released a new framework for crypto regulation. But again, it's not hard and fast rules. Like there are competing bills on Capitol Hill, but nothing has been passed yet. So, I mean, do you still feel that there is just a very amorphous space in terms of regulatory clarity in the U.S.?
I do, and I think that the vast majority of people I know in the crypto industry, they want to follow the rules of the road, but we need to provide clarity on what the rules of the road are here in the United States. Ripple, frankly, will hire north of 300 people this year, and we'll do more of that outside the United States, and our growth is 95% from customers outside the United States, and it's partly because the rules of the road are clear in those countries. Way back when I first got involved with technology in the late 90s, the government took the step to clarify what are the rules of the road for the internet. And all kinds of capital flowed in, all kinds of entrepreneurs flowed in, and we saw an amazing explosion of activity and innovation, and that's amazing. And frankly, the US has benefited massively on a geopolitical basis from that. We haven't done that work here, and instead, particularly the SEC, is trying to regulate through enforcement. Yeah. That's a super inefficient way to do this, as opposed to let's do the work, let's provide the clarity. And I think the executive order is an example of taking that step. And I think that, as you mentioned, the bills pending and that have been introduced, we'll see where they go, one in the House, one in the Senate, I think are positive steps in that direction.
I mean, that buzz phrase of regulation by enforcement is something that a lot of people have been talking about with respect to the SEC stepping in and making rules just by virtue of retroactively holding people accountable for things that they didn't realize were a mistake in the first place or were an issue in the first place. So a lot of people are looking to this lawsuit between Ripple and SEC as a moment of setting precedent for the wider industry. Walk us through what that looks like based off of like the hypotheticals of either of how the judge rules.
Well, so I do think, as you say, I think it's a pretty bellwether case at this point. And we talked about, the Howey test is this Orange Grove Supreme Court case from the 40s. I think that the Ripple test may be what we look at in the future. And, there are a lot of facts and circumstances that can be unique. But for Ripple and what the SEC is trying to do, I do think it's just the SEC trying to overreach the statute. And again, Congress gives the SEC power. The SEC can't just go take power. Congress has to pass laws that say, here's the framework. And in this case, what we're really talking about is the 1933 Securities Act, which created the SEC, which said if there's an investment contract, later on the Howey test.
When people think about the SEC versus the CFTC in terms of being the regulator of crypto, the SEC is typically seen as being stricter and kind of harder in their stance on digital assets. CFTC a bit softer. Does that stereotype bear out?
Well, I would characterize the SEC has built a reputation I think is deserved as being a bully. Many players that the SEC has gone after, they simply have to fold their cards. I mean, Ripple will spend well over $100 million defending ourselves in a case that we have tried to move forward as quickly as we can, and the SEC has gone as slowly as they can. Another example I think is pretty profound. There's a kind of infamous speech that Bill Hinman, the director of corporate finance in the SEC, gave in June of 2018 saying, ETH is not a security. And the judge 5 times in the last 18 months, the judge in our case, she has ordered the SEC to turn over the notes in that case 5 times. We still don't have those notes. And I look at that as like the SEC, it is a government agency. The government works for the people. The judge is ordering the SEC to turn these notes over, and they won't do it, and they keep coming up with new reasons why. So much so that the judge, in her most recent ruling, said the SEC is being hypocritical, and I will quote, saying not following a faithful allegiance to the law. These are damning words for an agency whose mission is stated as to protect investors. In the case of the the Ripple lawsuit, they destroyed $15 billion of value in the XRP market when they filed the lawsuit. That was not protecting investors.
So you told CNBC in May that Ripple might think about going public after you get a ruling on this SEC lawsuit. A lot has changed since then in the crypto landscape. What are your thoughts on that now?
Look, you're right. A lot has changed in the crypto landscape. That is not really true for Ripple. We had a record Q2. We continue to grow, signing up more customers. Volume, we publicly shared that volume on RippleNet grew around 10x year on year through our core product called On-Demand Liquidity. And so I remain very optimistic about the future of Ripple. And I think once we get past this, accessing the public markets is, I think, the right next step to kind of growing our business. But we want to get through the SEC, provide that clarity, and get closure on the pending lawsuit.
And last month there was a headline that Ripple is also potentially looking at buying some of the assets belonging to Celsius. Where does that stand, and are you at all considering buying the business outright?
Well, we are in a very strong position. We have a very strong balance sheet. I think we publicly shared we have about $1 billion of cash on the balance sheet. And so we certainly look at these cycles that the crypto markets have gone through as opportunities. This is really the third downturn crypto winter that I have been around Ripple for, and each time Ripple has kind of emerged stronger. And so we look at it as an opportunity to continue to grow and make sure we're solving customer problems, make sure the customers who are already dependent upon us can depend upon us for more things potentially. So we'll continue to look at opportunities, and some of the assets we see around are priced differently today than they were 6 months ago.
Garlinghouse also told us he doesn't plan to pursue an outright acquisition of Celsius and discuss his other expansion ambitions. To check out that full interview, head over to cnbc.com/cryptoworld. That's all for this week, but we'll be back again on Monday, and we'll see you then.
Thank you for watching the video. Hit the like and subscribe. Check all the links down below. Thank you for ADG Productions for making this happen and allowing it to happen. Check him out. He has some awesome audio comics over there as well.